Heartless CEO calls her a prostitute, then falls to his knees when he learns she's carrying his twins. Warmest welcome to Beyond Color Stories. I'm your storyteller, James, and I hope your heart is full and your spirit is light today. The wait is finally over, and I couldn't be happier to share that we have someone incredibly dear with us, my beautiful wife, Selena. She's here to speak to you in her own voice with a message from the heart. Over to Selena. Hello, my precious friends. I hope you're all doing okay out there. Before anything, let me speak a sincere prayer over each of you. May peace find your soul, may joy visit your days, and may love gently hold your life. I'm Selena James, and I want to thank you deeply. I read every message you leave, and your kindness fills me with gratitude. Your support touches us in ways we can't fully express. Truly, thank you. I promise I'll keep writing from the heart if you'll keep walking this journey with us. James and I pour everything into these romantic, emotional stories, and your presence means the world. Don't forget to subscribe to Beyond Color Stories. Now back to James for the tale you've been waiting for. Welcome back, my wonderful community. Once more, I'm James, and it's time to begin a breathtaking journey. So let's step into today's story. Steve Smith, the icy billionaire CEO, famed for his merciless business instincts, stepped into the velvet-draped shadows of a quiet dance club one Friday night. He was as impeccably dressed as always, his tailored suit hugging his chiseled frame, his beard perfectly lined, his slick-back hair gleaming with precision. Yet behind all that sharpness was a man weighed down by years of loneliness, a man searching without knowing what he'd lost. The low thump of music mingled with quiet laughter and whispered secrets, but Steve's eyes remained cold and scanning. Empty despite the glittering room. He didn't come for women or wine. He had more of both than he ever wanted. No, tonight he came because his silence at home had grown too heavy, because the echo of empty rooms finally became louder than his own stubborn pride. Then, like sunlight slipping through storm clouds, she appeared. Clara. Her cocoa-toned skin shimmered under the lights like stardust. Her silky hair fell down her back like a whisper, and her wide, ocean-like eyes locked with his. In that instant, Steve felt something stir in his chest, a feeling long buried beneath boardrooms and billion-dollar deals. She danced with the grace of a poet's sigh. Every movement told stories of resilience, of yearning, of midnight tears and morning strength. Steve had been surrounded by wealth his entire life, but never had he seen something, or someone, so achingly human. Without a word, he pointed her out to the manager. The man didn't ask questions. Steve Smith never repeated himself. Clara was led to the VIP area, nervous but composed. Her outfit was simple, barely enough to meet club requirements, but it held no vulgarity. She wore it for survival, for her ailing mother. She stepped inside, unsure who had summoned her, but when her eyes met his, the cold stranger with the trimmed beard and unreadable stare, her instincts whispered, danger, and something else. He offered her a drink. She declined gently, her voice low, telling him she didn't drink while working. He respected that. For once, Steve had no interest in shallow words or surface games. He just looked at her, long and hard, and for reasons she didn't understand, Clara didn't feel threatened, just seen. He finally broke the silence. You're too good for this place. She looked away, tired of men dressing pity as affection. But when she glanced back at him, there was no condescension, just rawness, brokenness. He stood slowly, like someone on the edge of something real. Come with me, just one night, no expectations. I need something honest. She hesitated, but there was no hunger in his eyes, only emptiness. She saw it, because it lived inside her too. Upstairs, the room was soaked in mahogany and luxury leather, but Clara barely noticed. Her eyes were on him. He removed his jacket with care, as if afraid she'd vanish if he moved too fast. She stepped closer, drawn not by desire, but by gravity. He reached for her cheek, his thumb brushing her skin with reverence. You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen, he whispered. Not a line, a confession. Clara's breath caught, not because of the compliment, but because of the honesty that wrapped around it. Their lips met slowly, deliberately, two souls whispering through touch. Their bodies joined, but it wasn't sex. It was surrender. Steve wasn't hard or dominant. He was tender, careful. He kissed her like she was the last real thing in his life. He told her truths he'd never spoken, how his empire was silent, how his nights were echo chambers of regret, how he'd built walls so high even he couldn't climb them anymore. She didn't speak much, but her hands roamed his skin like maps of memory. Her breath aligned with his like they'd always belonged there. That night, they didn't just make love. They found something they never expected. Steve slept with peace on his chest for the first time in a decade. But peace, like dreams, can be fragile. Morning came with cruel clarity. Steve woke before her, light slipping through the blinds. She lay there, soft, vulnerable, lips still swollen from kisses. And he panicked. He dressed quickly, each second unraveling the magic of the night. The voices returned, those that called emotion weakness and love a liability. He wasn't made for connection, not in his world. Clara stirred, stretched, and smiled. But when her eyes met his, her smile faded. He was distant again. "You should go," he said flatly. "It was just one night." Her face paled. "Just one night?" she echoed, begging silently for him to take it back. But he didn't. Instead, he pulled out money, dropped it like a transaction. "You're just a dancer. Don't make this into something it's not." Her heart shattered. She didn't touch the money. She dressed in silence, pride her only shield. Steve said nothing. But when the door closed behind her, the silence left him breathless. Clara walked the streets as morning crept across the sky, her heels in one hand, her bare feet sore against pavement. But her heart ached worse. The city, once bright with possibility, now felt empty, cruel. Still, she held her head high. Crying in public was never an option, not when survival demanded strength, not when her mother depended on her. But once she locked the door of her tiny apartment, she crumbled. The sobs came, sharp, ragged, real. She slid down the door, her hands trembling against her lips, trying to hold back the grief, but failing. His voice echoed, dismissive, sharp. "You're just a dancer." She'd heard worse, but not from someone who made her believe, just for a night, that she mattered. Every second of that night had felt sacred, but reality had stomped through like a thief. She pressed her face into her knees. The silence screamed back. She wanted to hate him, to erase the warmth they'd shared, but she still felt him, on her skin, in her soul. His whisper had carved its way into her heart. Still, life didn't allow for long heartbreaks. A cough from the next room reminded her why she endured it all. Her mother. Clara wiped her tears, pushed off the floor, and moved toward the bedroom. Her mother lay still, fragile, breathing shallow but steady. Medication, rent, food. All costs she couldn't explain away. The club was her only option. So when dawn came fully, she tied back her hair, put on a brave face, and went to work like nothing had changed. Days blurred, then weeks. Her shifts became routine, her dances hollow. No smiles, no flirting. She avoided the VIP lounge, refused tips that came with wandering hands. Her eyes stared blankly into mirrors while she painted on glitter that couldn't cover her pain. "Clara, you okay?" a girl asked quietly in the dressing room. She nodded. "Just tired." But inside, her body felt foreign. Her appetite shifted. She felt dizzy often, and a strange weight settled in her abdomen. She ignored it, chalked it up to stress. Until one night, washing dishes, nausea overwhelmed her. She collapsed at the sink, breathless. And in that chaos, something inside her whispered a truth. Her hand covered her stomach, not with fear, but awe. The next morning, she borrowed money and traveled miles away to a discreet clinic. She couldn't risk anyone knowing. Her hands were cold, her pulse rapid. The doctor entered gently, eyes kind. "Miss Clara, congratulations. You're pregnant." Her heart slammed. Pregnant. The word echoed. Then the doctor smiled again. "With twins." Clara's mouth parted. No sound came. Her hands trembled as they cradled her belly. Twins. Two heartbeats. Two pieces of that night now blooming inside her. Steve's children. She hadn't seen or heard from him since. Hadn't tried. But now everything was different. How could she raise them? What would her mother say? Could she still dance? Rent was overdue. But even in fear, something warm stirred beneath the dread. She didn't want to erase them. These children, her daughters, she somehow knew, were not mistakes. They were created in a moment that felt real. They were hers and his. And no matter how shattered she felt, no matter the betrayal, Clara knew she would love them. Fiercely. Completely. Watching the red taillights blur into streaks of sorrow against the night, his hands limp at his sides, soaked to the bone, not just with rain but with the weight of everything he never knew he had lost. He didn't chase the cab, not because he didn't want to, but because her words, "I don't owe you anything," were a verdict, not an invitation. And maybe for the first time in his life, Steve Smith, king of towers and temptation, felt small, felt powerless, felt irrelevant. He had spent years climbing ladders that led to nothing but cold views and empty nights, while somewhere in the cracks of the city, a woman he once abandoned was building a life with the two most real, most sacred pieces of him, and she'd done it without him. Back inside the cab, Clara sat still, the twins huddled beside her, their little hands clutching hers. "Mama," Amor asked softly, "why was that man looking at us like that?" Clara looked down, brushing a thumb over Alina's cheek. The girls had no idea what had just happened. No idea how the earth had shifted beneath them, how the past had roared up like a ghost trying to be heard. "He was just no one," she said gently, "just a stranger." And she meant it, because that man, once the center of her heartbeat, was now just a footnote in the story she was writing, a story about survival and love and fierce, unwavering motherhood. She didn't cry that night, not when she bathed the girls, not when she tucked them in beneath the worn quilt, not even when she collapsed onto the couch exhausted beyond words. But her heart was loud, because for 5 years she had lived with the ache of being unseen. And tonight, she had been seen, and she had chosen to walk away. That was power. That was freedom. And though the past had knocked at her door, Clara Ara knew it was her future she would answer to. And it would begin not with Steve Smith, but with her daughter's laughter echoing in the morning sun. Because if she did, she wasn't sure whether she'd collapse or reach for him. Clara's breath hitched as she pressed a trembling hand to her mouth, the taste of salt on her lips, not just from the tears, but from the years of silence that suddenly felt loud, too loud, in the quiet of their tiny living room. The twins giggled softly in Steve's arms, not fully understanding the gravity of what was happening, but sensing the warmth, the safety, the truth in his embrace. Children knew things, not with facts, but with feeling. And what they felt now was that this man, this stranger, was theirs. Steve didn't move. He didn't dare. He simply held them like he was memorizing the shape of their souls, his chest shaking with sobs he couldn't control. And when Alina pressed a tiny kiss to his cheek, unprompted, instinctive, his heart shattered all over again. "I'll never leave again," he whispered, not just to them, but to Clara too. "Even if you never forgive me, even if I have to earn every second of your trust back, I'll stay. I'll be the father they need. And if I can, the man you once believed in." Clara's spine straightened at that. The man she once believed in. Past tense. It echoed louder than anything else he said. And yet, something in her flickered. Not hope, but maybe mercy. Maybe the first thaw of something she had long buried. She moved then. Not toward him, not away. Just to the side, into the kitchen, because her legs couldn't carry the weight of emotion anymore. She gripped the edge of the counter like it was a lifeline, her body trembling, her eyes burning. And softly from behind her, Amora's voice floated out again. "Mama, he hugs good." Clara squeezed her eyes shut. The innocence, the simplicity, the way children cracked through the strongest shields without even trying. She turned slowly, her gaze falling on them. Steve, soaked, broken, holding everything he'd once walked away from. And the girls, her girls, their cheeks pressed against his chest, like they'd found something they never knew they were missing. Clara walked toward them then. She didn't speak. She knelt beside them, her hand brushing through Alina's curls, her other arm curling protectively around Amora. And for the first time since he had walked away that night, leaving her in blood and silence, she looked at him not with fury, not with bitterness, but with something closer to weary truth. I don't know what this will be, Steve. I don't know what I can forgive. But they know your face now, and that means you don't get to disappear again. I won't, he said quickly, fiercely, like a vow carved from his bones. Clara nodded once. Then she whispered the one truth she had carried like a stone in her chest for 5 years. You broke me, but they built me back. So if you want to be part of this, part of them, then you build too. Brick by brick. No shortcuts, no excuses. Steve looked down at the girls, then back at her. I will, he said. I'll build until my hands bleed. And in that quiet apartment, where love had long been tangled with pain, something shifted. Not resolution, not yet. But maybe the beginning of something new. Not the past reclaimed, but a future rewritten, could never reclaim, not by pretending the past hadn't happened, but by honoring it, by being present, by choosing love every single day. And as the hours passed and the world outside grew quiet, Steve leaned back against the couch, one arm around Clara, the other wrapped protectively around the girls, and for the first time in years, his heart felt at peace. Clara glanced at him in the soft light, her expression a mix of lingering pain and quiet wonder. She could still feel the scars he'd left, yes, but she also saw the man before her now, not perfect, but trying, really trying, and that meant something. It meant everything. I used to dream of this, she whispered, her voice barely audible above the gentle breathing of their daughters. Then I stopped. I thought it would never come. He turned to her, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. I stopped dreaming too, he murmured, until I saw your face again. Outside, the last drops of rain shimmered under the porch light. The world had shifted, gently, irreversibly. No promises of perfection were made that night, only quiet, steadfast ones of effort, of presence, of choosing love even when it was hard. Because the truth was, they had already lived through the storm. Now they were learning to dance in the sun, and for Steve Warner and Clara, the man who once lost everything and the woman who once carried it all alone, this was not just a reunion. It was the beginning of a new forever. Heart full, her eyes drinking in every detail, not of grandeur, but of meaning. The furniture, once sterile and modern, now bore touches of warmth, blankets folded with care, shelves filled with storybooks and photo frames of laughter and candid moments captured anew. A toy bunny perched on the arm of a velvet armchair, a pair of tiny shoes near the staircase, a coloring page taped crookedly to the wall. All signs that this house had transformed, not by renovation, but by resurrection. Steve watched Clara watch it all, his hands tucked in his pockets, his breath caught in his throat. For a long time, he had filled the silence of his guilt with things. Art, cars, business meetings, endless pursuits to distract him from the echo of the emptiness he'd caused. But tonight, the silence was soft, gentle, filled with the hum of a new beginning. Clara turned to him, her expression unreadable at first, then slowly blooming into something luminous. You didn't just bring us here, she said softly. You made space for us, for all of us. For me. He stepped forward, closing the distance between them, his voice hoarse with devotion. I couldn't rewrite the past, but I could build a future worthy of you. And she believed him, not because of the estate, not because of the soft golden glow that haloed their daughters as they skipped barefoot through the rooms, but because of the way he looked at her, as if he had walked through fire and come back only to kneel at her feet with nothing but truth and trembling love in his hands. Later that night, with the girls asleep curled in their new beds, one still clutching a starfish she'd found during the ceremony, Steve and Clara lay beneath the silken canopy of their new room, the ocean whispering through open windows. Clara's head rested against his chest, her hand tracing slow circles where his heart beat calm and steady. "There were so many nights I dreamed of this," she murmured. He kissed her temple. "And I spent years trying to pretend I didn't. But no more pretending, no more running." She tilted her head, eyes searching his. "You're sure?" He smiled, brushing his thumb along her cheek. "I've never been more certain of anything. You, Clara, you and the girls. You're not just my family. You're my redemption." A hush fell between them, filled only with the sound of waves and the symphony of two hearts healed by love's slow sacred work. And outside, the sea shimmered beneath a sky of stars, witness to a promise made not just in vows, but in every quiet choice that had led them here. A love rebuilt not in haste, but in reverence. A love that had weathered the storm and come home whole. "Just this. Just you." She turned to face him, her eyes catching the moonlight, and something deeper. Trust, love, the rare stillness that settles when a soul that's been wandering finally comes home. They said nothing for a long moment, letting the silence drape around them like a warm blanket. Then Steve did something that shattered the last fragile shards of pain in her heart. He dropped to his knees, not with a ring this time, but with bare hands pressed over his chest. "I was a man who owned everything," he said, voice low, trembling, "but knew nothing until you. You taught me what it means to love, to cherish, to kneel not in defeat, but in reverence. Let me be your king, but only if you'll always be my queen." Clara sank to her knees too, hands covering his, forehead resting against his, tears soaking into the fabric of his tuxedo. Her voice was a whisper against his skin. "You already are, because a true king protects. He doesn't command, and you've protected every broken piece of me I thought couldn't be saved." What followed wasn't passion born from fire, but from tenderness, from the slow crumbling of walls, from rediscovering each other, not as survivors of pain, but as architects of something enduring. They made love not as two souls grasping for solace, but as one heart finally free, beating without shame, without weight, without the past holding them down. When dawn broke, it found them wrapped in soft sheets. Clara's head rose and fell over Steve's chest, listening to a heart that once beat for power, now beating only for her. The days that followed held quiet wonders. Steve walked their daughters to school in his tailored suit, clutching lunch boxes with the same pride he once reserved for boardroom victories. He waited patiently as Ava showed him every crayon drawing. Clara watched from the doorway, her heart full. The man who once didn't know how to love was now drowning in it, living for bedtime stories, pancake sundaes, ballet recitals, and scraped knee kisses. He transformed a wing of the mansion into a sunlit studio for Clara, a sanctuary of canvases, poetry books, and spilled paints. A place where she reclaimed her voice, her art, herself. Her past no longer haunted her. It had become the foundation of her new beginning. Every evening, Steve would join her there, not to speak, not to interrupt, just to be. He'd kiss her forehead before bed with the same awe as the first time, memorizing every line of her face like scripture. Sometimes they spoke for hours. Other times they just breathed, hearts in sync. Words became unnecessary. Even the staff noticed. Steve Warner, once stoic and sharp-edged, now greeted them with smiles, asked after their families, remembered their names. The man who used to dine alone now sat at the kitchen table, stealing flour-dusted kisses from Clara as cookies baked and the girls squealed with laughter. On weekends, they vanished to the countryside. No security details, just bags carried by hand, selfies in sunflower fields, sticky ice cream kisses, barefoot dancing beneath string lights. The world had called him a billionaire with a heart of stone, but Clara had melted it, worn it like a crown. And though the world still whispered about her past, Steve never listened. To him, she wasn't a woman broken by life. She was the queen of a heart that now loved endlessly. One night, as their daughters chased fireflies in the garden, Steve leaned toward her, voice husky with emotion. You know the most beautiful part of all this? Clara Ara raised an eyebrow, smiling. That I get to spend the rest of my life watching you rule. Not as someone who took from the world, but as someone who gave it back more beauty than it ever gave you. She placed his hand over her heart. Then let this be our kingdom, she whispered. A kingdom where love, not pain, is law. Where we raise queens who never question their worth. And where you, my husband, will never again wonder if you're capable of love. Because you are. You always were. You just needed someone to show you. The moon rose higher, silvering the garden. Clara Ara stood tall, not because she had escaped her past, but because she had turned it into something holy. Her throne, her crown, her story. She was not just Steve Warner's wife. She was the queen of a heart that now knew only how to love. And as the silver night melted into dawn, she remained there, on the same balcony in the same spot, holding a miracle. A tiny life swaddled in a cream blanket, stitched with golden stars. Her son, just 3 weeks old. A perfect blend of two once lost souls, now rooted in love that had rewritten their destinies. The breeze danced through her silk robe, her rich chestnut hair glistening under the sun. She rocked him gently, humming a lullaby she once sang through tears, now filled with joy. Behind her, footsteps approached, warm, familiar. Steve's arms circled her waist, his lips brushing the curve of her neck, his breath warm against her skin. You gave me life, he whispered, her eyes closed at the weight of those words. The baby stirred, cooing softly, as if he too understood the gravity of his father's truth, that he was born not just from love, but into it. Steve's hands moved to cradle his son as Clara Ara turned in his embrace. She was still healing, but she was radiant. Together they stood in silence, the kind that says everything without a word, the kind only known by two people who have walked through darkness hand in hand. Ava and Elise burst onto the balcony in matching pajamas, hair wild and eyes wide with wonder. Mama, Elise squealed, running up, then pausing when she saw the sleeping baby. Oops, she whispered. Ava tiptoed beside her, climbing into Steve's lap and kissing her brother's forehead. He looks like you, Daddy. Steve laughed, a deep, joyful sound that Clara Ara now equated with everything real, everything sacred. They sat together on the bench, Steve with the girls on his lap, Clara Ara beside him, their son between them. A family complete. The scent of roses wafted from the garden below. Steve looked down at his daughters tracing shapes on his palms, and then to the boy yawning contentedly. I didn't know then, he murmured, that I wasn't just finding love. I was building a legacy with it. Clara Ara leaned her head on his shoulder, her eyes fixed on the blooming horizon. We were building our kingdom, she said, stone by stone, kiss by kiss, memory by memory. A year had passed since their wedding, not quieter from fading passion, but from deepened rhythm. Love now pulsed through lullabies, midnight diaper changes, the quiet power of forehead kisses and sleepy whispers that said, even in darkness, I'm here. The mansion, once a symbol of wealth, now throbbed with life, with impromptu dance parties in the kitchen, finger-painted walls, and a nursery Steve had painted himself in sky and starlight, whispering through every stroke. This son will never feel unwanted. Even in his empire, Steve had changed. He spoke slower, listened longer, canceled flights for bedtime stories. Clara Ara's studio grew, her art praised not just for beauty, but for soul. She no longer painted from pain, but from abundance. Then one spring evening, as the garden exploded with color, Steve took her hand and led her to the courtyard, where fairy lights blinked like stars. Clara, he said, holding her face, you didn't just change me. You revealed me. You gave me something no empire could. She touched his wrist, felt the steady pulse. And you gave me something I never had. Not just safety, but honor. Not just love, but the space to be. Surrounded by every reason that mattered, Steve knelt again, not to propose, but to vow again, silently, through action. He kissed her hand, stood, and lifted her into his arms. Their daughters clapped, their baby cooed, and they danced, beneath a sky full of stars, to the rhythm of a love that had survived everything and become something holy.